Now you're very excuse me. Now you're very welcome along to the football show. Happy to say Alyson Rudd of the London Times is with us. Alyson, last time I spoke to you, England were in the throes of Euro 2020. It was all going so well. And, I mean, it ended in quite a memorable night at Wembley for various reasons.
It certainly did. But it's the sort of thing people will happily forget if they're English, I think, Joe.
Look, we want to talk to you about a few things. It's been a really interesting start to the new season, not least with the various London clubs. We'll start with Spurs and Harry Kane and his rather excruciating tweet this afternoon. So, I mean, what a saga. And once again, Daniel Levy gets his way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be people who study football business writing about this in their PhD dissertations for years to come. First of all, it's a case of how not to run your career as a footballer, because Harry Kane appointed his brother as his agent. And when you're of the stature of someone like Harry Kane, you need an equivalent agent. And I just think keeping it in the family wasn't good enough. Daniel Levy is renowned as the ultimate negotiator. He's done deal after deal, squeezing what he wants out of it, whether that be the player staying or the player going at his price. He doesn't like games being played. He doesn't like conversations being made public. So the whole saga was conducted poorly from Harry Kane's point of view. You can't rely on a handshake. The tactic of letting people know there'd been a sort of unwritten agreement that he might be allowed to go, that was never going to work. You don't shame Daniel Levy into doing things. He'll do what's right for the club and for the bottom line. So I suspect what ought to happen is Harry Kane will get a new agent, and we will see. Probably this time next year, we'll be talking, Joe, about him getting a £175 million move to PSG or something.
Various missteps along the way in the Kane camp, and even we were just talking with Miguel Delaney earlier on in the show, even the tweet today just seems misguided. So, like, there's something very disingenuous about hailing the wonderful reception from the Spurs fans on Sunday as having any kind of effect on his decision. Like, let's be real here. So that's just, kind of patently disingenuous. And then even the I will be staying at Tottenham this summer, I just don't understand what they gain from that. Like, this does not give them any leverage or any kind of head start in negotiations next year. It just really highlights to the fans that actually I do still want to go. So when the next line says I'm 100% focused on helping the team achieve success, well, that's actually not quite true either. Like, I've no idea why Charlie or Harry or their crack team there said, let's stick in I will be staying at Tottenham this summer. That'll really show Levy. I mean, it's hard to make sense of this right the way through, very much including this tweet now, which is supposed to settle everything down.
Yeah, I think probably they were overthinking and worrying about what message they wanted to send. I think it's been very important to Kane throughout his Spurs career to have that image of one of their own, and his loyalty, I think, has been part of his brand. He's been praised for it. He likes having that relationship both with the Spurs faithful and with England fans also. I think it probably hurts him quite a lot to think that he might have been left in this horrible no man's land where nobody loved him. So you had people like yourself, Joe, who are analysing it quite critically, and Spurs fans sort of growling that, he wouldn't be here if he got the money he wanted, he got the move he wanted, so they probably don't feel loved anymore by him. You've got fans of the clubs who might have thought they had the dosh to woo him to their place, to their gaff, feeling a bit like, well, is he ambitious or not? I mean, you do get to a point sometimes with players where they almost become criticised for being too loyal. So he was left in this, I think he's left in a no man's land where he was very desperate to be loved and to indicate that he has ownership of what's going on in some way, because they would have guessed that he's not coming out of this very well in a business sense. You don't go public saying you're on your way out and then you stay. you try and paint it differently. But yes, you're absolutely right, Joe. It wasn't done in a clever way, which just underlines my initial point, which is he needs craftier people at the helm of his business. And when you're that important a player, it is a business.
Yes, I know. I feel like Daniel Levy right now is having a cigar, saying to somebody, "That was just too easy." I mean, come on, make it more interesting for me.
While stroking a cat.
Indeed. So Chelsea-Liverpool this Saturday. I mean, this kind of feels like an upping of the ante in the Premier League season thus far, in that we'll get to see two very legitimate contenders against each other. So 5:30 on Saturday. I mean, the Chelsea thing is kind of. I'm curious for your thoughts. I sort of the routine at Chelsea, where yet another kind of multilingual millionaire comes in, does his stint, and departs, and there's no real sense of kind of a plan beyond that, just to do his 2 years and take his payment. I'd stopped finding Chelsea that interesting once the last of the Mourinho players had kind of departed the scene. With Lampard, then I remember thinking, oh well, this is kind of interesting and authentic and real, and that didn't work out. He gets the sack, and Thomas Tuchel came in, and I was fully ready to go with, my God, Chelsea, this is just such a pointless football club. And then Tuchel, like against all expectations, completely energises the club. He's a really interesting character, I think. Culminates with the Champions League win. They sign Lukaku now. There's a sense of possibility about the whole thing. I'm really paying attention. I mean, you're covering them. Tuchel just seems like he's been so impressive in the way he's grabbed this kind of... It's hard to call Chelsea a drifting club, given that they win so much, but drifting in a sort of corporate sense. And he's made the whole thing very real and relevant again. I don't know how you found covering Chelsea under Tuchel.
Well, you've summed it up to a degree. It is refreshing, but I understand, Joe, why you say you sort of got a bit dispirited watching them, and you feel like they just bring in a manager then sack a manager. That is actually the exciting and wonderful thing about Chelsea, is that they are ruthless, utterly ruthless when it comes to management. And if anyone had any doubt about that, Frank Lampard, absolutely adored by the fans. They had no compunction about letting him go. Another club might have given him a bit longer, given that he helped them out in a difficult transfer embargo time. I let him go. What Chelsea managed to do is that they're ruthless at that point in the hierarchy. But throughout my 27 years of covering Chelsea, at no point have the players lost a sense of camaraderie. So what you have is a club which functions a bit like a small club. They have wonderful family atmosphere that is engendered through lots of different ways, partly through their excellent facilities, but they really go for that. You join Chelsea as a family, and that can withstand the ruthlessness of when they get rid of a manager. And often it's player power that gets rid of a manager, because the owner listens to players. He puts them first. That helps the family atmosphere. And what you have with Tuchel is someone that's come in and he's embraced that sense of camaraderie. He loves it. He calls himself a conductor, like a musical conductor. That's how he sees himself when he's at his best. And he says he's conducting people who are beautiful at their jobs, gifted and fantastic, and make lovely music. And he just makes sure they have the conditions in which to do that. He doesn't try and overcoach or impose too many instructions upon them. He wants them to have freedom. Players love that. So it's a great symbiosis that he's there at the right time. And I think the ironic thing is he arrived, I don't know if you remember, Joe, but he arrived in London with the tag of being a difficult manager.
Yeah.
If he didn't get on with the owners, he would say so. He would fight his corner. He'd be prickly. He'd get cross if they said one thing and didn't do it, or he didn't get the money he wanted. All that's happened is he said, "Oh, I love it. I love it here. I love dealing with Marina. I love the owner. I love what they're giving me. I feel looked after, and I've got a fantastic club." And so everyone's buying into this. I mean, it will peak and it will ebb, and he will be axed. But right now, it's really working. It really is.
That's really interesting what you say about him seeing himself as a conductor and being a touch hands off, or giving the players a certain freedom. I've been under the impression that he was almost the opposite of that he was very much, a big details man. And when a side has 19 clean sheets in 30 games, you definitely think of organisation and, drill sergeant. So that's really kind of an interesting insight into how he sees his role.
But if you do it right, the players won't notice that you'll have those attentions to marginal details. You'll be doing it whilst them thinking that this is cool. We like training. But what he's doing is making sure he looks after the fine detail without the players having to worry too much about it. It's a formula. And if it clicks, you let it go. You only start really going over finicky if it starts falling apart. And I think also there is a slight disconnect in that if you watch him on the touchline, he's like Basil Fawlty. He's very tall, but he sort of collapses on the ground.
Yeah.
He can get so head in hands angry about one cross not coming off, when any other manager would think, well, that was a good cross, that's promising. If we do that again, I'll be happy. He takes the burden of annoyance and frustration, but he has the ability not to let the players feel hamstrung by that they can still express themselves.
You've been writing about Jorginho as one of the underrated types in this team. I think a lot of people watch Euro 2020 and for the first time really said it to themselves, oh, okay, I see what everybody's kind of raving about here. He really caught the eye for Italy. And do you think he's been underrated this whole time, or has he picked up of late?
I think he's still underrated. I mean, I wrote a piece about him saying, well, he probably won't win the Ballon d'Or, but he's on the shortlist. We should ask why he's on the shortlist and praise the attributes he does have. And so people will go, oh, why are you praising Jorginho? He's nowhere near a Messi. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying he has other qualities which often get ignored when it comes to the big prizes. There's so much that's impressive about him. His demeanour, for one. I mean, there's a man who smiles under any circumstances. He must be a great teammate to have. But he's been so adaptable under successive managers at Chelsea. Do not forget, he was booed by Chelsea fans who decided he was Sarri's son. That was his nickname when he joined. And as soon as they fell out of love with Sarri at Chelsea, they decided everything that was wrong with the team was because of Jorginho and his relentless passing that didn't get anywhere. Lots and lots of short, and often didn't get anywhere, but it kept you possession. Then Frank Lampard comes in and says, that people are thinking that he's probably not going to use Jorginho because he doesn't suit Frank Lampard's stated aim, which was to get the ball forward quickly and economically, long balls forward. Immediately, Jorginho does that, changes his style completely, gets the fans to sing his name. And he just sort of morphs into what the manager needs. And now he doesn't touch the ball hardly at all. He's just, he's intelligent with what he does. So he'll press when it's the right time to press. And he makes sure he offers an outlet to whoever's on the ball. He doesn't feel the need to be a relentless pivot in terms of passing the ball around, but he's always there when it's necessary to be there. And he's not particularly fast, but he's got sort of amazing energy levels. He can keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think managers absolutely adore him. And of course, he's got one of the cutest penalty routines you'll see. that little skip before he scores.
Lukaku looks like this is going to work out just beautifully for all concerned. How do you think he's changed as a player, Alison, if at all, since we last saw him in the Premier League?
Well, one of the things I do like about Lukaku is how open he's been about how he's changed and what he's learned. He's been open about the fact that if he's not particularly happy, he doesn't play as well as he might. He says he's someone who likes to learn from different managers, and he's come back from Italy feeling like he didn't start out liking being a target man. He didn't like having his back to goal. Wasn't something he wanted to do. But he's discovered that it can be a beautiful thing and he can do it really well. And then lo and behold, on his debut, what he does absolutely brilliantly is hold the ball up. I mean, Arsenal, they were warned of the fact that he would was going to be good at that because he'd said so himself publicly. But they were like, you know, this is we can't cope with this. He's so good at it, and it gave Chelsea that focal point. I mean, Jorginho was Chelsea's top scorer last season with 7 penalties. Now they've got somebody who could get triple that quite easily. And not only that, but make sure the ball goes wide to their very good crossers of the ball, the very good dribblers of the ball. And they just looked, I think the whole team looked lighter, happier for him being there. It was like a joy to have him there. And also the other significant thing was I did feel Lukaku himself and the rest of the Chelsea team didn't really need to get into 5th gear. So I think we could see a different Chelsea at Anfield on Saturday, where they just give us a bit more.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game for various reasons. The other London club we wanted to talk to you about was Arsenal, who gave Lukaku such a warm welcome back to Premier League life. So on the evidence of Brentford and then Chelsea, their game against Man City at the weekend has the potential to not be so pretty for them. It feels very grim right now. Okay, so on the upside, they have spent 130 million, so at least the club are investing. Now, this 130 million has been written off by most as well, has it improved them at all? So Ben White for 50 million. Tavares from Benfica, he came on at the weekend, 8 million. Lukonga played at the weekend for 15 million from Anderlecht. Martin Odegaard from Real Madrid for 35 million. And then Ramsdale in goals from Bournemouth for 30 million. They've definitely paid over the odds in certain instances. The one thing you would have to say is, at least for the first time in a while, there's the beginning of a strategy, i.e. they're going for youth, and it's a step away from, you know, ringing Willian and David Luiz and saying, do you want too much money to come and, you know, play in the short term? That is something. I mean, it's not much, but it's a beginning of something for Arsenal. If we're looking for any kind of small positive, at least it's a strategy. Yes,
I heard in the background behind you, Joe, the scraping of a barrel. I don't know if that was my imagination. I'm not sure if it is a strategy. I think once you've finished outside the European places, you lose that bargaining chip and you do pay over the odds. I mean, for example, I don't want to sound too harsh, but Odegaard, he was okay on loan. I didn't feel, oh, wouldn't it be fantastic if Arsenal were to get him to sign permanently? I mean, he's very smiley and looks very happy to be there, and that's nice. But none of those signings are signings that make me think this is a team that's really going to challenge for the top 4. I mean, it's so bad that most people aren't using the phrase top 4 and Arsenal in the same sentence. They're joking about relegation and the fact that, you know, Ramsdale has a habit of turning up at clubs that go down, and they're a bit of a joke at the moment. It's a very difficult position to be in when you're not offering players European football, and you're not, you know, you've got the lure of a big name. It's a big club with a fantastic history, but the manager too, highly respected player, but he hasn't proved anything as a manager really yet. He did come into Arsenal. I was there for his unveiling, and I was so impressed by his demeanour and his determination and what he said he hoped to achieve. And he said he was going to get rid of negativity, he was going to get rid of dissenting voices, he was going to make sure it was a team jam-packed with team spirit. People who didn't listen to him, do what he wanted, they would be out. And yet, we seem to have a mixture of players who seem to be trying very hard and others who look a bit confused. If he's planning meticulously for his next opponent, then, well, I'm surprised. If he is, then the players aren't listening, because everyone knew how Brentford would play. They press incredibly high, they're relentless, incredible energy. They look surprised by this, Arsenal. They had not prepared for it. And similarly, they knew what they were going to get with Chelsea, and were all over the place. So there's something's not clicking. And I just find it peculiar, given that the Arteta came in knowing there were problems, and the problems still exist.
No one is more down on Arsenal than me. I find them an irrelevance really at the best of times. But just in their defence, only Man City took more points than Arsenal after Christmas this year. They took 5 more than Chelsea, 8 more than Leicester, 9 more than Liverpool, 10 more than Spurs. This is from Christmas to the end of last season. And they were top scorers of that group of teams as well, and they conceded the fewest goals too. Now that is impressive. That suggests something there was kind of beginning to work. And I do think we could be reading a touch too much into the opening matches of the season, in that there's been the COVID situation. Brentford on the first day away was always going to be a tricky tie. And, things couldn't go from how they were last season, the second half of last season, to just down the toilet again. Now, do I think they'll get top 4? No, absolutely not. Do I think they'll get top 6? Probably not. I guess I'm kind of framing this in the context of Arteta seems to be on the verge of getting the sack. Like, that's how bad things seem to have gone. So I'm kind of wondering, that great finish to last season, and now these admittedly 2 very iffy performances, but in the midst of COVID and everything else, I just wonder, on Arteta, are people just disregarding the end to last season because, I don't know, it was strange and it's COVID and there's no crowds and various things? Like, his win percentage is 53, which isn't good, and Emery's was 55, but there was a degree of Arsenal being on the up towards the end of last season, and it just seems any sense of optimism about that now has just been completely discounted. I wonder if we're being a touch unfair.
Probably we always are when we talk about football, because emotions get involved, don't they? I don't think we're being that unfair, because it's the same old problems about leadership. We've been talking about what is it about Arsenal and that lack of leadership on the pitch. Sometimes you need to win a game that you shouldn't win, but you have the willpower to win it, the arrogance to win it, the togetherness to win it. And when things have gone slightly wrong, they don't necessarily crumble, but they don't look like they've got that it factor of, we know who we are and what we're fighting for here. And I think also you're right about, it was a bit weird with no fans and COVID and so on. One of the big problems for Arsenal is their home stadium. It's a place where they go very quiet, so you can hear the dissenting voices. There has not been a sense of, we don't care what's going on, we're going to support you come what may there. So I did write in a piece. It was like going to the Emirates is like being accidentally opening the door to a marriage guidance counsellor's office, because you can hear people having an argument.
Yeah.
You can hear fans arguing about a player or Arteta, or booing a player. You'll always get I'm not naive, you will always get dissenting voices at a ground, but normally they are drowned out by the ultras or the passionate or the songs. But the Emirates, and then that transmits to the pitch.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to hear conversations between fans sat, 30 feet apart, yelling, when's he getting the stat? But you shouldn't be allowed to. And it can be quite a toxic environment there. And often, I never, ever, ever work this out. Why would you pay for a season ticket, turn up, bother parking your car, 3 miles from the stadium, or getting off at the wrong tube because the one you wanted to get off at is closed, and the very expensive pizza en route, and leave at 65 minutes? They do that there. It's not, I think there's a contract. If you're a fan, you're a fan. And, you're lumbered with it. You stay with your team. You stay, unless there's something, criminally wrong, you stay with your team. And you might make them better if you cheer them rather than, leave or shout out what you're cross about.
Yeah. God, that sounds grim. That really does. One last point on Arsenal very quickly, because I don't even fully believe everything I've just said in their defence. I don't hold out much hope for them. But Danny Murphy, in I thought a very fair critique of Arteta, said that, well, look at what Tuchel did at Chelsea, where he arrived first game, identified a formation and pretty much stuck to it and made it work. And Murphy was making the point on TalkSport, I think it was. He was like, at least let's get back to being hard to beat Arsenal. He was saying, they've bought Ben White, who plays in a 3, who's not good in the air, so put him in a 3. And if you want to have Tierney as one wing back, have Saka as the other, that's pretty adventurous and interesting. Get 2 solid midfielder types. You have an array of them. They're not world beaters, but stick in Partey with a bit of experience and Xhaka just to sit there. And then you've got, some talent with Aubameyang looked in the mood, in fairness, when he came on, and Lacazette and Smith Rowe, and you've overpaid for Pepe, but, you throw him in there and just at least force teams to beat you, because you couldn't say they made Chelsea really beat them at the weekend. It was far too easy. And Murphy really put that at the door of Arteta. Like, you've got enough there to be more competitive than you are. And his ultimate conclusion was there is no identity about Arsenal under Arteta. There's no sense of what formation it's going to be, what the personnel will be. It's just a bit of a weak mishmash. And that's kind of the most worrying thing if you're an Arteta fan.
Yes, maybe he has focused too much on the negatives instead of thinking about what's good at the club. I mean, he even in recent interviews, he's been saying, there are things we don't know, and maybe he's getting bogged down with the admin. But Tuchel didn't arrive with a similar CV to Arteta. This is Arteta's first club in charge, and if you were running a big conglomerate, nothing to do with sport, to do with making computers or whatever, you wouldn't bring in as your CEO someone who'd just been on work experience with Virgin Media down the road. You would, and that's effectively what he is. He's someone with some very good work experience going to a club that he knows, but how well does he know? I mean, he's been at other clubs as well.
Yeah.
He said, and when he joined, he said he'd wanted to join Arsenal as a player because he admired Wenger so much. And again, Wenger was a long career, someone who plotted a path, who stuck to principles, and you don't do that in the public gaze as your first job.
No.
I mean, and I wish him well. And I, as I said, I was very impressed when he joined, and I would have loved it to have worked as an experiment. But you can say all the right things and not necessarily have the skill set to execute them.
No. Well, look, we'll watch the marriage counselling sessions play out over the coming season. Alyson Rudd of the London Times, thanks so much.
Thank you.